Welcome to Art Talk. I'm Patricia Shippee, host of Through the Eyes of the Artist, a program that focuses on art from a human perspective by getting to know the artists, their attitudes, motivations, and their lifestyles, all the things that influence their artistic expression, giving us an opportunity to see our world through the eyes of the artist. Meg Wadsworth has already lived the proverbial 9 lives, although she's still learning. After receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree from Wheaton College in Massachusetts, she went on to earn a master's degree, an architectural degree, master's architectural degree from Harvard University. She practiced architecture in the United States for over 30 years. Focusing on residential design. A curious mind and a series of happenstance led Meg to pursue another interest, which was clay. Its history, its relationship to the earth, to architecture, and to art. She returned to school and earned an additional set of bachelor and master's degree in fine art at Pratt Institute in New York. Meg has exhibited her clay sculptures in New York and in Connecticut for the past 10 years, in between her many travels in Italy and other parts of the world. Meg also brings her artistic temperament to writing, painting, photography, and to life. Welcome to Art Talk, Meg.
Thank you, Patricia.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And especially since you just came from an art class where you were out painting under the trees and so on. How often do you take classes?
As often as I can.
Good for you. You're
once a week, and then I found another one I'd like to take, so I'm doing 2.
Good. Is it all painting?
All painting at the moment,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Watercolor and oil.
Well, Meg, because you're so multifaceted and so interesting as a creative person, we're going to do our program a little bit differently today by first focusing on clay, which has been your interest for the last 10 or 15 years.
Major interest,
Major.
I would say.
Okay. Yes. So we're going to take our audience to your studio, where we're going to see how you work with the material and the processes you use there. So we're going to go now to your studio, and then we'll come back and do a lot more talking. Good. So let's go. Well, you can see that Meg likes to garden, having these beautiful lilies in bloom right now. And also, she goes kayaking with her grandson rather frequently, being here by the water. And we're going to take some of the clay processes step by step here in Meg's studio. And the first part we're going to talk about is the slab process, which is used for plates or tiles or flat pieces. And I'd like to show you one of a finished platter, which has been then hand painted, and we'll see more of them later. But Meg is going to describe for us how this works. So I'm going to move myself away a little bit, and you can tell us how the slab process works, Meg.
Mm-hmm. I have put a rather more fat piece of clay on the canvas and rolled it a few times through the roller so that it is now almost ready, we hope.
This is a clay press.
So then we trim it a bit like this, roughly the form of a circle.
Now, how many times do you have to go through the press for?
Probably 4 or 5 times, because the clay is quite thick when I put it on, and I have to do it slowly, otherwise it gets ripples in it. So the next part of the process would be to...
Now, what do you do about these little bumps here?
Well,
I mean, is that going to cause a problem, or?
You just get the air out of it.
Okay.
Like that. Otherwise, it could cause trouble in the firing. So the easiest way I've found to do this is to put a piece of cheesecloth over the slab.
So this is by experimentation.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Many errors.
Okay. Cheesecloth works.
Yes. Then I put the form.
So this is the form that you use, like a template that you use each time? Okay.
And this also is not an easy thing to do alone.
How can I help you?
It is possible. Well, we're going to
It is possible.
I'm just going to take the pieces like that, and I'm going to give it a quick flip.
Woo!
And there we have the slab in the mold.
Omelet making. It worked, it worked.
Now, it's still irregular, but the next process then, when this is a little harder, will be to put it on the wheel. I put clay all around the bat underneath to secure it in one place. And then I take my pin tool and start the wheel going and just hold the pin. And as the wheel rotates, then I get the perfect circle. This then enables me, the cheesecloth, to remove it, slide it out of the bat.
Oh, the train is just interrupting us here, but that's all right. I think we heard you.
I hope.
Okay, well, maybe you better repeat that part. You take...
On the wheel, as the wheel is spinning, I hold the pin tool like this, and it inscribes a perfect circle on the clay. So that then, I'll let it harden a bit more. I can pull the cheesecloth and just slide it right out.
And then where does it go?
And then it goes to dry hard.
Okay.
After which we can paint on it, fire it, glaze it, and it's finished.
Well, for the plates that we're going to look at here in a moment that have been hand painted, were they fired or just let dry?
We did both ways. When it's not fired but dry, we call it green ware. And the painter then just painted on the green ware. Then it was fired. We also tried it firing first and then doing an underglaze. It's a different substance in each case for the firing.
Well, there is a glaze on these plates that Charles has painted for you, and you're going to show us some more of them. Are they glazed first or after?
The final is the final all over glaze is done last.
Okay, all right. So that's
because it's always an underglaze. He can choose his colors. You actually, if you didn't like it, you could wash it off if it's pre-fired.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Well, let's go look at some of the finished products.
Good.
Good.
So I'll leave it up to you too.
Meg, it's about 90 degrees outside, and this clay feels wonderful. I don't want you to talk about kilns or firing at all.
It's too hot.
But this is cool, and it feels, it's very nice.
See how smooth it is?
Yeah.
Silky.
Yeah.
And that's the kaolin in it, which is the smoothest.
Which is different from the Italian clay, is it, or not
clay
really?
is pretty much the same all over the world.
Is it?
There's fine clays. China clay is a very special kind. But ordinary earth clay is very similar to this. You can get all of the grit out of it by sieving it or letting it slake when all the grit goes to the bottom.
Well, what about color, though? I mean, in the studio, the other part of your studio, and we're going to go in there later, and you can describe to us, the clay is red. Now, why is that?
In my case, I put red iron oxide in the clay, otherwise it would be white.
Okay.
So you can put any colorants in it. Usually there's red iron oxide in the earth clay. Around here, there's a reddish quality to it, tan. And that's the most common ingredient for coloring.
But in some cases you fire, in some cases you glaze, in some cases you paint, even with acrylic paints, don't you?
That's only on the bas-reliefs. You can't fire something with acrylic paint on it. As someone said, it's not dishwasher proof.
Well,
but the glaze is.
The glaze is, yeah. Well, take us through from the evolution of your working with clay. You started making ceramic pieces, pots, I assume.
Started just as an ordinary potter, and I loved it. And I made bowls and mugs and plates and everything. But I didn't really want to become a production potter, to have to do 40 of the same thing. I had a wonderful teacher who really wanted us to be able to do it. So I tried. But the things that I really enjoyed the most were the forms, the single, a handle or the shape of a pitcher. Is a one-of-a-kind thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until maybe 3 years had passed in the studio that I found a way to do some sketches I had made of Venetian facades.
And
so
that was architecture.
That was in a class of how to treat the surface. You can paint in the way these platters have been done. You can draw, you can stamp, you can smear, you can do all sorts of things to the surface. You make it a really sculptural thing. But when the teacher, in this case, pulled out an airbrush, I thought, oh, that's how I could do the variations on a Venetian facade. Because the stucco is all yellows and pinks and reds and buffs, and it all seems to merge. So I tried the airbrush, and that just freed me to do these sketches that I had been carrying around for several years.
So is that the beginning? I mean, this piece
So this is one of the early ones.
And is there, that I assume is a Venetian, at least certainly an Italian village?
No, it's actually a campo in Venice, which looks very much like that.
Yes, yes.
There is a canal that runs across in front, and there's a church in the foreground, which you of course can't see.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was one of the experiments, trying also then to get some sort of sense of depth, because this is what's also intriguing.
Yes,
with the architectural connection.
With clay, yes. And the dimensionality, the differences. Now, where is the airbrush? I mean, the airbrush inspired you, so where did you use the airbrush here?
the airbrush is all through where these colors change.
Uh-huh.
And then there is some working over with the brush, in this case for shutters and little details.
Yeah.
But to get a smooth sheet of color and changes of color, changes of tone, the airbrush is perfect.
It worked.
Yes, it works.
It worked. It worked. And was that done when the clay was still wet, or
no?
It's after you
after it's fired.
After the firing.
It's finished. Oh, the finished firing.
Okay.
And then I put it on.
Yeah.
Oh, medieval column.
Oh, now the next stage is the medieval clay pieces. How do you describe these, Meg? I mean, these are all European, obviously, architectural remnants almost.
Remnants, ruins. They are evocative to me of a whole culture, a whole period when much was destroyed by war, natural phenomena.
Yes.
Or people just taking what they wanted to build their own homes over centuries. And I've had difficulty explaining to people. They say, why do you do ruins? And finally my grandson one day said, why do you build these broken down buildings? And I said, well, you look out there at the willow tree. There's nothing left but the trunk and a fork. And what does that make you think of? Does it make you remember when it was a full tree and a lovely tree? Does it make you remember the hurricane that broke it down? What does it make you think of? It has a past, and it reminds us. And there's something of the wonders of the old abbeys that kept so much of civilization alive.
Indeed.
That there's still something that remains. There's still something that stands there that speaks to us of its past. And that's, I think, what intrigued me particularly. The beginning of it all, however, was a dream.
Oh.
I had found a book of medieval castles and abbeys, and I was reading it, as is my wont before going to sleep. In the morning, I was trying very hard to stay with the dream that I was having, because it was so vivid. And in the dream, these pieces of buildings were turning into sculptures. And I was trying to hang on to this. How would this be? How could it be? I was sort of hovering on the edge of the dream. And it began to come to me more and more. You could pit fire these. You could paint oxides on them. And I ran right off to my studio that morning and threw some arches and things together and fired them in sawdust. And there are two actually in the other studio.
We'll look at them,
which are just smoky, which is burned right into the clay. And there were many fires often in these places.
Yes.
Also, I had read Umberto Eco's book
of
the monastery fire, which was very vivid.
Leaving a mark on these man-made stone edifices and facades. Yeah. So you were inspired that way, and then you found out how to do it with clay to make three-dimensional.
So this again is a slab, such as you saw being done a few minutes ago, and this also is formed from the slab.
Yes, I see.
So that machine is useful.
Yes.
for not just platters.
Yeah.
One can roll it out with a rolling pin. It's not that difficult.
So you're
but it's more
using different processes here. Part of it is slab. Do you use, for instance, an armature here, or how do you shape these arches?
This would be shaped on the flat, lying flat, with things then being built up.
I see.
Then as it stiffens, and you have to do this slowly with damp cloths over it so it doesn't dry too fast, so it won't warp. Then you can set it up and you can continue to build on it. Clay is very giving if you treat it properly.
If you empathize with it.
This clay is a special clay body that a friend of mine gave me. It's a formula he developed for sculpture. And this is very stiff. It has a lot of sandy material in it they call grog. So that has a better chance of remaining straight and sturdy.
Which is very much in keeping with the stone architecture that you're talking about. Well, these are fascinating, Meg, and also the building up of the bases and the ruin aspect and the history that you're presenting.
Should I get one of the hill tones, or should we wait until we see it upstairs?
Yes, let's do that. But I would like you to describe the clay, how you begin, and some of the processes to make these beautiful pieces.
Good.
So let's do that now.
A very earthy project.
Yes, indeed.
Now this is one of the pieces that I did the morning after the dream, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. That this was put in a sawdust kiln and just left to smolder most of the day and the night probably, and becomes blackened in the burning process, burned right into the clay, which was the way I felt had happened to these ancient buildings. Right, this has been mixed up 2 weeks ago. It's a process that I call slaking. And I put in this barrel 2 different kinds of clay and other substances that help it mature at a lower temperature, and this red iron oxide, which gives it the red color, because I want the facades to have some basic color. Now this clay I had some help with from a 9-year-old who thought it was the most marvelous consistency. He did this with it until it got well mixed, but you see how really muddy it is. It's the kind of clay, if you were on a country road, that would stick to your shoes and you'd probably take the shoes right off your feet. So from here we go to a drying vat. The next stage is to put the clay in these drying vats, which are under-fired clay so that they are very absorbent, and it soaks up much of the water that's in the clay, so that this is not quite ready. Yes, it is ready to wedge. And this is the final part of the process before you can throw on the wheel or put it in the slab roller. This is still a little sticky, but if I spent a half an hour with it, which probably would be very good for the clay, it would probably be about right. But I think because it's still that sticky, I'll just put it in another, whoops, I think I'll just leave it there. No. I'll put it in another drying vat and let it sit for another day or so. But this wedging board is made out of plaster, which is also very absorbent. And that's a standard kind of wedging board. And we've just had a quick look around another part of the studio, and this large cylinder you see here, stainless steel, is the kiln. And in order to fire the kiln and know when the clay is ready, it's finished, you have these cones which are calibrated for the temperature, the proper firing temperature. You get a cone which melts at a lower temperature, which gives you a warning, and then you get your cone for the finished temperature. In this case, you have 3 different conditions. One where I stopped the kiln when it was perhaps a little too soon, and here when it was perhaps a little too late, and here was just about right, but not enough difference to really affect the firing in my case. The smaller ones are for the little test kiln, which was the green one over by the wall. Now here's a collection of tools. These are all tools that one buys in ceramic supply places. They're for working on the wheel, for cutting away clay, trimming. For the most part, those are trimming tools. Then there are other tools that one can use for making textures on the clay. And I like to find things, not buy them. I don't know what this is. I think it's for keeping a rug in place or a chair or something. And this will make a pattern. Or this is a threaded plumbing fixed fitting. This is a grater, as in for nutmeg. This is a bit of coral, is it, from the sea. And a lion's face, which you can also do in a, make a positive from that. These ones, these little stamps, I'd say, were made with these tools just by cutting out a bit. And these are very good for making patterns around the edge of a plate, say. There's a comb that came from Tokyo, someone brought back, which is very good for making lines around the edge of a pot. You can find it at printers, old letters. This is the end of a curtain weight, which you can roll in the clay, so. And a pastry cutter. So it's almost like making a painting.
Wall? Wall in the gallery. He does city facades in clay.
Oh.
Yes.
There was someone starting to do that.
That was fascinating, Meg. It really was, going through all the steps. I have to ask you, that glob of red clay that you pulled out of the tub there, what's that going to become? Do you know?
That's going to become another facade, one of the wall pieces I call a bas-relief.
The bas-relief pieces. And I remember one that you did that was about 8 feet long of a...
That was the very first one.
Was it?
I took all of my favorite buildings in Venice and I called it Omaggio a Venezia. My homage
Your
to
homage
the
to
city
Venice.
I love.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, speaking of Italy, I'll ask you that immediately. What made you so interested in Italy? How did you get the Italian connection?
Well, there is a slight one way back. My great-grandfather came from Italy, whom I've never really been able to trace, but I have found letters and personal papers of his. However, our first view of Venice was our first view of Italy, was coming back after 2 years in Baghdad. From the desert to Venice, it seemed an absolute paradise. We arrived by sea on a boat from Beirut at 9 o'clock in the morning. And to see Venice by water for the first time on a beautiful June day is just fabulous.
Now, at what point of your life was this?
2 small children, then 6 and 8. And my husband had been teaching in the College of Engineering in Baghdad. So that was a whole tremendous other kind of experience.
Yeah.
And because we'd been very careful and saved, we had a month's trip through Europe on the way home.
Oh, wonderful. But you
And
had
we
that...
didn't want to leave Italy.
You didn't?
No, we just fell in love with it.
Yeah, yeah. And you keep going back?
We didn't get back until 1969 when he had a sabbatical leave for a whole year. And he found work in Venice as an advisor to a student group. So we had a complete year there with a younger daughter and our son. It was just, if we needed anything more to convince us, that was it.
That was it. That was it. Well, is that how and where you first became interested in clay?
No, actually that happened at Pratt.
It did.
I had been doing architectural work and finding it more and more, the tedious part of it, doing working drawings, fine lines, dimensions, and that sort of thing. I had turned that over to our son, who had at that point become an architect, and also I'd been doing a little teaching at Pratt, and which really bothered me, all of the polemics surrounding architecture at that particular period were distressing.
Yeah.
I thought. Yeah. Friends said, "Oh, I found the most wonderful thing to do. I'm down in the clay studio. Why don't you come?" So I went down, and that was it. It was like our first glimpse of Venice. There was the clay.
You were caught. You were caught. Yeah.
Caught.
Yeah, yeah. With your heart and soul.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's come back to heart and soul. We have to take a public service announcement break now, Meg, but we'll be right back and continue that thought. Be right back.
Art is a process that fills our lives. See it, enjoy it. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Griffis Art Center, New London, Connecticut.
Welcome back to Art Talk. I'm Patricia Shippee here with Meg Wadsworth, and we're talking about how Meg first became interested and fell in love with clay. You fell in love, but then what motivated you to go back to school? Here you were teaching, you became a student again, and to go through the whole academic process.
This is the bureaucratic side of academia, because I had taken every studio class in clay that I could possibly take as a non-matriculating student. Suddenly notices came from higher up that I would have to sign on for a degree in order to finish taking the rest of the courses. So I sent off letters to institutions that I thought probably had torn up my records by this time, but they hadn't. So I got all of the academic credit that I needed for history and that sort of thing. So I could go on then and finish taking all of the courses in the undergraduate school in ceramics, and which was wonderful for me. And then when that was over, I walked across the street to the graduate school and said, could I take a course? And they said, no, not as a non-matriculating student. You have to sign up for a degree. I sighed heavily. They said, well, you have 7 years to finish it. So I took 6.
You did.
Just paced it slowly and went on. I managed, by the time my husband retired, I received my degree in the same year.
Marvelous, marvelous. But in the meantime, you and your husband were going back and forth to Italy, and
Every
you were
summer.
working with clay in Italy.
To some extent. We had a very small cottage in the country, and they had found a lot of clay when they were digging the well for this place. And I would find it on the sides of the dirt road where we lived. And it was all around us. It's just clay country in that part of Italy.
Yeah.
So it was normal to want to go do something with it. We did have a little raku kiln that we put together, so another friend who's a potter who lived in Rome. So we were able to do a certain amount of small work there.
Is that when you studied Etruscan pottery and the culture? I know you've written so many different things, philosophical writings, and you wrote a beautiful paper on Etruscan Bucero. Now, what has Etruscan...
Bucero. That was fascinating to me, having gotten through a bit of clay chemistry, to know how on earth they made it. So this was another sabbatical leave that Chris had in Rome. So I said, I'll get credit for a course while I'm over there and do a little research. So I started going to all of the institutes in Rome to find out who thought they knew how Bucero was done. And for the most part, they were very impossible solutions that they had. Most of these archaeologists, I think, had never talked to a potter or never really asked, because all over the world there's something will crop up in China, or Maria Martinez
Discoveries,
in this country who did blackware. So certainly it was known that they might have asked. However, we decided we would build a kiln modeled on an Etruscan design and get some clay out of a clay bed near an archaeological dig near Viterbo and work with that. And so we had a wood firing, gathered some people on a hot August day, and managed to come up with the Bucero.
We did.
Close enough that a friend, an archaeologist from Sweden, took into her institute in Rome and broke the pieces open to compare with the old Bucero, and said she couldn't tell the difference.
Couldn't tell the difference. Wow. Well, now, Meg, how did that experience, that learning experience, inform your work? For instance, let's look at this beautiful arch. Did that experience of working with the Etruscan clay inform this piece?
Not really.
Okay.
It told me other things about the nature of the clay, how it could be used as a slip, at what point it would melt if you fired it to a higher temperature. There were peripheral things that came out of it, but I think this is just a curiosity that I had pursued this. I wanted to get the answer, and I felt I did.
It was sort of like another academic degree, so to speak. You needed that in,
a step.
Yeah,
a step.
yeah. Well, tell me about this piece, Meg. Is this an imaginary place, or is this from a drawing? How do you go about your design or your subjects?
Looking at existing ruins, looking at photographs of ruins, knowing something about the forms that were prevalent in that period, and just playing around with them and juxtaposing them in a way that is architecturally suitable, I believe.
Now, is this area here, the airbrushing, there's color here?
This is a fired piece.
I see, yeah.
And this, again, if what you learn from the Bucero is if you burn in a reduction atmosphere, they call it, which is depriving the inside of the kiln of oxygen, then this seems to cause a chemical change in the clay. It's not as though the soot goes into it, but there's something going on with the oxides in it. So that this is not something that would wash off the way soot would. It's actually integral.
It's in it, yeah. Well, that piece talks to me about space. A lot of your work has to do with space. Either the negative space here or in some of the bas reliefs, you're working with the element of crowded space. Also the fact that there are rarely figures in your spaces. Is that purposeful?
No, I think that's a matter of temperament, perhaps.
Is it?
I discovered, as I looked at pieces all together, that I really didn't have people in them.
Okay, yeah.
And I wondered why.
Yeah.
And perhaps it had something to do with my life at that point. Maybe it was so full of people,
Yeah.
or that I
Yeah.
didn't need this, or maybe there's just a solitary aspect of me.
But
And also with this sort of thing, it is a very solitary feeling when you
is.
see these ruins.
yeah.
The people have gone, but the history is still there.
Ah, okay. All right.
The people have passed over it, they've swept over it, they've caused a lot of the breaking down of the building. Some of it's natural disasters, some of it's wars, mayhem, whatever.
So you're leaving this behind. Is there for me, there's a certain feeling of spirituality here. Are you reaching for that in any of these pieces of Italian culture?
I realize that the forms are definitely related to cathedrals, churches. Again, I don't know that this was as conscious a thing as it would seem now.
Yeah.
I think that there is a link with the whole creative urge toward something beyond. It's a difficult thing to express,
Yeah.
but it's
Well,
very definitely there.
That's my cue, Meg, really is, because you've done so much writing about the creative process and the collective unconscious, which I'm very much in tune with the more I speak with artists. And I'm going to ask you to read something that you wrote as part of your master's thesis for your fine arts degree at Pratt. And I'm going to ask you to read it, and then we're going to go to the studio again and see a little bit about the work you're doing now, and then come back and talk some more about
All right.
all of it, if you would, please.
To be an artist is to be in touch with the creativity that is an essential part of each being. Once someone has grasped that essence, he is driven by it. How he works with it and what he does with it is his individual triumph or trauma, according to his capacity to hear the tune or see the light or clear the way. That capacity varies markedly from one to another. Those able to arouse the most intense feelings are called geniuses. The rest of us, aspiring to penetrate the fog, at times succeed in receiving a ray of light, and we are moved by it enough to keep on trying. This is perhaps the only explanation I can find, or need to find, from the choices and events that have inexorably taken over my life. Through my work, I've begun to realize my own history, to get closer to my own sensibilities, and to glimpse what yet may be.
Thank you. Let's go to the studio and see some of the newer works that you're doing and the photographs and paintings together. work keeps evolving, Meg, and now you're into painting and photography. And this piece that we have here, one of your most recent paintings, has to do with the reflections in Venice. Tell us what you're up to.
Well, it's actually somewhat removed from, it was work done in Venice, but it grew out of what you've seen of the canals and the buildings reflected.
Let me just see. Maybe you can explain that here a little better. We saw some of them in the studio. I'm going to move this over here.
This was a fascination with what happens in the water, which of course is ever changing. And there's the reality and the images that are always going to be different. So the contrast there is something that had interested me. Then the idea of distortion, which, if you can see the painting behind you, this is a building across the Grand Canal being reflected in another old building, which has a warped facade. It's something that's probably 400 or 500 years old. The glass is old and that's warped. So what happens with the architectural elements of the building across the way when it's reflected in the windows was something that I found, and the minute I saw it, was an intriguing possibility, what one could do with that. So I started exploring that. And then I thought, well, I think I saw this also by accident, that something reflected in your house could be that distorted. So then I began with the
paintings.
The paintings.
Yeah.
Or photographs. This was just playing around from the photographs.
You're taking these photographs, are you not? They're magnificent. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But this was a few bottles and a red pepper, basically.
Ah. Okay.
But the forms just become completely something
You're
else.
dissolving them into abstractions. Yeah.
Just the way the images of the city dissolve in the canals.
Water. Yeah. Oh, here are some people. Thank you.
Finally, we have some people. But this again was back to the light and space.
That's a beautiful shot.
It's a late fall day in Venice in the late afternoon.
Are you dealing here again with shadows and reflections? Certainly space.
Space and light primarily, and always this little narrow calle that goes you don't know where. You know the city, you can know it extremely well, and you know where you're going, you don't have to think where you turn. But it's always a surprise. It's always that sense of surprise as you go around the corner, and I think this is one of the fascinating things about the place. And every few weeks the light changes. So I found in making notes for photographs, if I want to be in a place at 10:30 in the morning, that I really have to know what week or what month particularly.
Oh, the light is so different.
Because the light is so different.
Yeah. Well, you, I think, particularly, although it seems that your life is so structured, I mean, you're able to go back and forth from clay, photography, you're taking classes all the time, but you do allow chance and serendipity to play a large part in your work, don't you?
Oh, yes. I think much of our lives have been, my husband and me, have been affected by this pure chance. Landing in Italy, the house we had there, the jobs that he had, the things that have propelled me toward clay, or the discoveries that have happened. All of the ruins, as I call them, came out of a dream.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned the dream. Yeah.
So
all of these things that
just
are part of the collective unconscious, but also being open to chance and that curiosity that allows you to be open to it.
But I have found also that if one, instead of trying to find an answer to something, that if you just sit back and have a meditative period, is about what it amounts to, that in that time the answer will come just out of the blue.
Yeah. Well, you never either seem to be pressured, my feeling of perceiving you, by time. I mean, we're also concerned with the element of time. And you're able to cross-culturally go back and forth does time affect how you work in Italy? I mean, there's a whole cultural memory there, and then you come back to American technology. I mean, how do you deal with that cross-cultural changing?
It's not too easy sometimes. There's something known as Italian time, which could mean arriving 3/4 of an hour late for dinner.
Oh, really?
I mean, this is an American sort of comment that I hear people make. But I find over there, I don't look at a watch. I don't pay much attention to it. If I'm hungry, it may turn out to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If I've worked, there's such an intense absorption in what I'm doing that that's the time I'm on most of the time.
Yeah, that creative place.
And I'm really bothered if outside time, clock time, impinges on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I've been known to take the telephone off the wall, just put it on the floor, and that's my time.
Yeah, but you do manage it. I mean, you don't feel dislocated for a long period of time when you're going back and forth from America to Italy, for instance.
No, not
You do
really.
it every year. So.
I do it, yes, twice a year.
Yeah. Well, back to time, though, what I observed in your studio is that you also have to control time, it seems to me, working with clay. I mean, do you have to work fast while it's wet and then be patient for it to dry?
There are ways you can speed it up. Better not to speed up the drying. It's better to slow it down. And you can keep it wet for a long time with wet cloths in its own little humid atmosphere. And that's what allows me to work on the facades, because that can go over a period of a week or 10 days,
It can,
actually.
yeah, because you're adding to and you're thinking.
And you're thinking, and when you add to it, that slows it down too. You have to always have it at the right consistency to be able to put on the slurry and add something so it will stick.
So the timing is all very important here.
But it's a pace that's so slowed down. It's a dreamlike pace in a way.
Yeah. So it doesn't really bother. I mean, you've got it down. You've got it down. I think it's great. Well, now going back and forth, which you do, there's quite a large, I understand, binational artist community. Is there a global arts community? Are you a part of this global arts community, or?
I wouldn't say so. I have friends in Venice, say, who are painters and sculptors, and friends in Rome who are painters. And we talk together, and we know each other, and we meet other artists, but it's not a big part of the life. It's just I like the people I play music with.
You do? What music do you play?
Recorder.
You do?
Dolce.
I didn't know you played it, Well, I observed in your studio, I mean, there were a lot of books and various objects, and certainly music. So all of these things inform your work, too.
Music has a lot to do with time and space, really.
There you are. There you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rhythm, structure. There's a very strong link with architecture. In fact, you can take a lot of the early Renaissance designs, or many other buildings too, but those particularly, and you can construct triangles and circles that are all related within the design in a very mathematical way.
Yeah, so there's music. Meg, we're running out of time, but I have to ask you, looking back, you've made so many choices in your life. Would you do anything differently?
I don't see how.
You do it again.
I'll do it again.
You do it again,
yes.
Great. And then, as an artist, what message do you want to convey to the world? Is that a tough question?
That is a tough question. The message is love what you do.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us, Meg. It's been wonderful sharing with you today. And thank you for being with us for this week's Art Talk. Until next time, I'm Patricia Shippee. Bye.